So there were 4 girls living in one dorm. What was that like? Was it really crowded?
Well, the rooms were fairly large, and if you had the bunk beds, it's not like you had them spread out. You know, it was like there's single beds in a room that's probably was 2 or 3 times bigger than any dormitory room is now. So it wasn't bad. And then, of course, after the first term, there was quite a exodus of students because some of them got married, but some of them just flunked out. Yeah, I mean, and so the dormitory was much nicer. I mean, it wasn't crowded or anything, and you didn't have to worry about the dorm. And the second and third years I lived in the dorm, and there was only 2 in a room. It's sort of like other things. If the rule is really, really bad, you don't do it. But if it's not too bad, you go ahead and do it. So it was like the regulations were, okay, just go along with them.
So tell me about the demerit system. What all did that entail?
You got demerits for what I always thought were very stupid things, like not wearing your green ribbon when you were a freshman on Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember what day it was, but anyway. And the boys wore stupid little beanies that were green and orange, diagonal stripes. And if you were caught not wearing your ribbon or beanie, you got a demerit. And if you got 10 demerits, you had to do things like scrub the quad with the toothbrush or scrub the medallion with the toothbrush. And if you did other things that were awful, you ended up with, you couldn't go out on the weekends. But the curfew was, it was 10 o'clock Monday through, Sunday through Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday it was midnight.
So what sort of things did you do in this big lounge room?
You'd see people here. Not very much went on. I went out with a guy for a while who was a pianist, and I think the only reason he dated me was because he could come to the lounge and play the beautiful grand piano. But he was a Dave Brubeck fan, so it wasn't classical music.
What was the policy for allowing men to come into Waldo?
There's too many gossips in a girl's dorm to get away with anything as far as men in the room, so it was in here or the lobby. And this wasn't open all the time. I can't remember exactly. But the other thing you may not know is you couldn't have a date to go to a football game. There was no fussing at the games. And they called it fussing if a boy and a girl were together. They still publish that, but they call it a student directory, don't they? They used to say Fusser's Guide.
So tell me about your house mother. What was that like?
Well, the rules were really meant so that the parents could say, this college is taking care of their kids. And there were resident aides, I guess. There was like 1 to a floor, and it was one of those things you just avoided them as much as possible. But they did come through to check on you now and then you hide the beer and hope they didn't see it. And the house mother was one of those people that you saw on Sunday, and occasionally when they had receptions, when parents came, why, she'd be around. But it was, I guess I just believe in keeping a low profile and avoiding trouble sort of thing. I only was late once. That was coming back from skiing, and we were in Lebanon, and it was 5 minutes to curfew. Didn't make it.
In the previous interview, you had mentioned the dress code. Can you elaborate more on that?
Well, you couldn't wear pants unless it was to go to a gym class. Or sometimes on weekends you could wear clothes, but you couldn't walk across campus unless you had a coat over your pants. But dresses, I mean, that was it. It wasn't until the 60s that polyester pantsuits started becoming acceptable. And I can't remember when, all of a sudden it just was that everybody looks grouchy to me. You know, it was, you used to have good clothes that you wore on Sunday. You had your regular clothes that you went to school in, and you had your grungy clothes that you messed around in. But now everybody just looks like they're grungy. Yeah, but you had to do your own ironing as far as dresses, etc. And there was a room for that, come to think of it. And I think that was part of... There was a funny little kitchen that was not equipped with anything because it was before microwaves. But it was, there was a room where you could do ironing. And you did your own ironing. But of course, that was when there was dresses. When you got grungy clothes, you don't iron anything. So I met a few people. They were, some of them I still know and see once in a blue moon. But I really didn't know anybody when I moved into the place, so it was kind of odd.
Gail, you shifted from going to class to working in a chem lab. What was that like? Well,
I was given $5 a week as a, what do you call it? You know, parents, you know, when you get an allowance. And that didn't do it for me because even though cigarettes were 25 cents a pack, it was, I spent more money than that. So I went to work in a Chinese restaurant for 80 cents an hour on weekends. And I grew to dislike Chinese food because we got a free meal of pork fried rice, I think. Anyway, and a girl across the hall said, you can work in the chem lab, $1 an hour. So I started doing that, and then a man down the hall named Sam Likens wanted somebody to grind hops and do dishes. So I went to work for him as a, well, that was when I flunked out of school, and so I begged and got to be, he hired me as a lab technician on June 1st, 1959. And then that was the official hiring date. And then I worked for him until he retired in 1982. And by that time, I was a chemist. And eventually, I became a... Well, when I first worked, it was a very egalitarian type place because Sam Likens didn't have a PhD. And we did a lot of research that was, because there wasn't any other way of doing it, we developed ways of analyzing hops and so forth, which got published in various places. And the hop project itself has developed from 2 people. It went up to as large as 10, and now it's back down to about 4. But when I was working, there were quite a few people.
Publishing dozens of articles was a big part of your professional career. What was that like?
I think it's about 40-some. A couple of them were really good because they got cited in other people's publications, which means it's better than going against just publishing something and having it die in the woodwork. If you do something long enough, you either become very good at it or you leave. The other thing is there isn't any place you can learn about hop chemistry, which is what I was involved with, because it's not taught as a subject. You have to learn it on the fly. And there aren't very many people who are involved with hop research, so you can be an expert. I mean, there's a difference between the hops. That was just, it was like plant genetics and so forth. I mean, it was developing new varieties that are disease resistant, which is the whole point of the thing. But if you can't make beer out of them, they're not any good. So we did the quality analysis to make sure they could make beer. And the varieties Cascade, Nugget, Columbia, Willamette, I can't name them all, were developed at Oregon State with the USDA. Yeah, I got to go to Strasbourg. The International Order of the Hops is the International Hop Growers Organization, and they're very nice, and once a year they meet, and they usually, one person from each country is they nominate somebody to receive the, quote, Order of the Hop. And I am a Chevalier of the Hop. I have a beautiful certificate.
Was it easier for women then or now?
Probably now, but there were some conventions then of civility and tact that were probably a little better then. It was probably too strict, but for the times it wasn't any stricter than most people's parents, so.
Do you think there's more opportunity for women then or now?
Now. Oh, well, when I went to high school, I liked science. I was in what they call advanced placement classes in math and sciences. And my high school advisor said, well, you can be a science teacher, because that was where you could use science. The opportunities were stenography, nursing, home ec. I know some people who became dietitians, but that was it. And when I see in the departments now, there are women who are PhDs directing their own projects, and that didn't happen. There were women, very few women with PhDs, but they weren't anybody's boss. They were somebody else's flunky. And I started thinking, I don't remember a woman professor.
Okay, so looking around, what do you think about the changes that have happened since you were here last?
Terrible. I realize a lot of that is probably necessary just because of safety, fire, and everything else, but I just liked the old big rooms. They were nice.
So Gail, there's a lot of talk here about a ghost at Waldo. What are your thoughts on that?
Now, there were some weird things that went on, but like somebody said they found a baby in the chute, the trash chute, but it was a dissected cat from somebody's lab experiment, ended up in the garbage, which had a slight scandal going at the time, but there was no ghost. $65 a term tuition. And it was something like $400 a term for room and board. I can't remember exactly. Maybe it was $600, but it wasn't astronomical. I know my parents scrimped a bit to send me to school. So when I flunked out, after I paid for everything myself. But there wasn't student loans, and you didn't need student loans because people would work.
So we're wrapping things up now. Do you have anything else that you wanted to say?
I realize it couldn't be like it was then, but when you look at a room like this with the beautiful floors and the, what do you call that, decorations on the ceilings, it's like, it's something that's gone away from the dormitory, certainly. When I looked at Snell, I think it was one of the few dorms I'd been in, and those little cells that looked like monastery things, where everything is built in, you couldn't move the furniture with a dynamite stick. And when I think of the fun we had, I mean, you got bored with the way the room was, you'd move things around.